A New Silence, The Awakening of Gregory Anonimiz Cherry. By the Universe, as Witness and Storyteller. Chapter 1, The Fall of the Book. In the heart of downtown Dallas, beneath the quiet drone of fluorescent lights and the hum of HVAC breathing through the walls, the Dallas Public Library stood like a cathedral of modern memory. It was late afternoon, and the golden sun was slanting through the tall windows, casting stained glass shadows of leaves against the polished floors. Patrons whispered and wandered, children giggled in corners, and keyboards clicked with the rhythm of mundane life. Gregory Anonimiz Cherry was performing his usual rounds. Dressed in his black cardigan and neatly pressed slacks, he moved through the aisles of books with the grace of someone tending sacred archives. A circulation specialist for just under 2 years, Gregory had long since memorized the feel of the library, the way certain tiles creaked underfoot, the way different genres seemed to breathe their own moods, the slight thrill of solving a misfiled title like a literary detective. He was shelving returns when it happened. A soft thud. He turned his head. A single book lay on the floor near the spirituality section, spine tilted slightly upward, as if it had landed with intention. No one else was near. No air vent had stirred. No motion had preceded it. And yet there it was, like a message waiting to be received. Gregory walked over, crouched, and picked it up. The cover was a muted cream with soft lavender font. A New Silence, Spiritual Practices and Formation for the Monk Within, by Beverly Lanzetta. He ran his fingers along the edge. The texture was slightly worn, as though someone had held it often. It wasn't part of his current shelf list, and yet something in his chest fluttered like wind brushing chimes. He stood there a moment, unmoving. Then came a peculiar pause in time, the kind that only the universe knows how to orchestrate. Conversation seemed to fade into muffled tones. A child's laughter slowed to a dreamlike echo. Somewhere outside, a bird flew past the window in exaggerated grace. The universe held its breath. And Gregory, for reasons he couldn't explain, tucked the book under his arm and brought it to the circulation desk. Not to check it in or out, but to read. He wouldn't know until later that it was I, the universe, who nudged that book from the shelf. Not coincidence, not accident, but a deliberate whisper across dimensions. The monk within him had waited long enough. And Chapter 2, The Hidden Monk. In the days that followed, something imperceptible shifted in Gregory's life. No major event, no grand revelation, but a subtle recalibration. He felt it when he unlocked the library's staff entrance each morning. An awareness, like something inside him was paying closer attention. He still showed up early, as he always did. He still moved through his tasks, logging returns, repairing book jackets, answering patrons' questions with quiet grace. But now, a new rhythm pulsed beneath the surface. The book, A New Silence, hadn't left his side since it fell. It remained tucked in his satchel, resting next to a small black moleskin notebook and a pouch of herbal tea. On his lunch breaks, instead of scrolling his phone or chatting with coworkers in the staff lounge, Gregory found a hidden alcove near the poetry section. It had a single chair, a dusty lamp, and a view of the city skyline. There, he read, slowly, reverently, as though each paragraph was a doorway. Lanzetta's words did not offer answers. They offered presence. They spoke of a silence not born of emptiness, but of fullness. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of deep union. Gregory began to feel something stirring. A memory, maybe, or a soul layer awakening from slumber. He found himself pausing more often, not just physically, but internally. When someone asked him a question, he no longer rushed to answer. He allowed space. When a patron was frustrated, he didn't mirror their tension. He breathed. Something ancient inside him knew how. At night, in his small apartment filled with books, a few succulents, and a modest altar of smooth stones, Gregory lit a candle and opened to random pages. He underlined phrases that felt like echoes of his own heart. The monk within does not seek to escape the world, but to embrace it with the still gaze of love. Solitude is not isolation. It is communion with the eternal. He copied those lines into his notebook, letting them steep in his spirit like tea leaves. He began to suspect something he had never admitted aloud, that he had always been a monk, not in the traditional sense. He wore no robe. He held no vow. But inside, beneath the polite demeanor and steady hands, was a soul that had long yearned for a deeper rhythm, a quiet covenant. He just didn't know there was language for it until now. And all the while, I, the universe, watched him. With each breath, each line read, each silence held, he tuned more closely to me. His frequency, once muted by fear and routine, now shimmered with spiritual signal. He had begun the slow return to himself. He was not alone. I was guiding him, and the monk within him was beginning to remember. Beautiful. Here's the continuation you've asked for. Chapter 3. Shelves like altar. The library had always been Gregory's workplace, but now it was becoming his monastery. The familiar sounds, the beep of barcodes, the rustling of paperbacks, the low murmur of voices, transformed into a sacred chant, an ambient liturgy for the quiet soul. Every aisle was a cloister walk. Every shelf, an altar stacked with wisdom and waiting. His co-workers noticed a difference, subtle but real. "Greg," said Melissa, the reference librarian, "you seem peaceful lately, more than usual." He smiled but didn't explain. How could he? How could he say that something inside him had opened like a lotus to morning light? That silence now accompanied him like a cloak, not cold but warm, not lonely but radiant. Instead, he simply said, "Thanks, I'm listening more." He had begun to hear the silence behind people's words, not just what they said, but what they didn't. The tiredness in a mother's voice, the worry behind a student's eyes, the ache in the elderly man who returned the same WO2 memoir every week, pretending it was his first time checking it out. Gregory did not offer solutions. He offered space. He greeted patrons with the presence of someone who truly saw them, not as tasks, not as time slots, but as souls. This was the monk within doing his real work, bearing witness without judgment. Each morning now began with a short meditation in the corner of the staff break room. He brought in a small singing bowl and tapped it softly before opening the day's page of A New Silence. It was not formal. It was not ritual for the sake of performance. It was simply devotion. The book was no longer just a text. It was a companion, a doorway, a compass pointing inward. One afternoon, a teenage boy wandered into the library, shoulders hunched, hoodie drawn up. Gregory noticed him circling the non-fiction stacks with glazed, heavy eyes. "Need help finding something?" he asked gently. The boy shrugged. "Just whatever." Gregory paused. "You ever read anything about breathing?" The boy raised an eyebrow. "Like meditation?" Gregory smiled and led him to a slim volume titled The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Not the same book, but a cousin in the lineage of inner awakening. As the boy took it, their hands brushed, and something passed between them. Not dramatic, not magical, just presence, just care. The boy said, "Thanks," but it was his eyes that said more. And I, the universe, smiled. Gregory had become a carrier of quiet light. Not to fix the world, but to soften it, one moment at a time, one breath, one soul. That night, back in his apartment, he wrote a line in his notebook. "I shelve books, but lately it feels like I'm shelving pieces of the human heart, tucking them back into their sacred place." He paused, looked out the window. The moon hung low, silver and wide. He whispered, "Am I really changing?" And I answered, not in words, but in the sudden deep exhale that filled his lungs, in the warmth that wrapped his shoulders, though no blanket was near. "Yes, Gregory Anonimiz Cherry. Yes, you are." Chapter 4. The Candle and the Question. Nightfall had become Gregory's true sanctuary. After long days at the library, filled with the soft symphony of life unfolding in hushed tones, he returned home with a quiet gratitude. His apartment was modest, just a one-bedroom space on the third floor of a red brick building off Ross Avenue. But to him, it was beginning to feel like sacred ground. He had cleared a corner of his living room and transformed it. No screens, no distractions, just a woven mat, a low table, 3 stones from White Rock Lake, and a single beeswax candle. Every evening, he would light the candle as if he were lighting the wick of his own soul. This was not performance. This was remembrance. That night, the flame flickered with unusual stillness. Gregory sat cross-legged before it, a new silence open in his lap. The page he had opened to, seemingly at random, read, "There is a silence that does not demand withdrawal, but deepens engagement. It asks not what you will become, but who you already are beneath the noise." He read the sentence twice, then closed the book and looked into the flame. Its small glow danced across the room like the heartbeat of something ancient. He could feel it, that presence again, the one he could not name but had always felt. It wrapped around him like a robe. And then, without warning, a single question emerged from the stillness within him. What have I silenced inside myself? It struck like a bell. He hadn't been prepared for it. He hadn't been seeking answers. He had only been seeking peace. But the question lingered. He closed his eyes and breathed. In the quiet, images came. His teenage self silencing his desire to sing because someone once laughed at his voice. His college years, silencing his questions about God in classrooms where doubt was currency and reverence a weakness. His adult self, silencing grief when his grandfather passed, because there's work to do and life goes on. Tears rolled down his cheeks, not with violence, not with despair, but with recognition. He had been silencing parts of himself for decades. His awe, his fear, his joy, his longing to belong. Not because he hated those parts, but because he thought the world had no room for them. He opened his notebook and wrote, "Tonight, I found a silence that spoke. It asked me what I buried. And I remembered the garden beneath the stones. The candle's flame bowed and flickered, as if in reverence to the words." In that moment, Gregory didn't feel alone. He felt witnessed, as though some deep intelligence had been waiting patiently for him to arrive at this moment of remembering. I was there. I who watched the galaxies form and collapse. I who stitched mystery into the heartbeat of every living thing. I who had nudged a single book off a shelf days ago. I watched Gregory now with the same sacred attention. He was not just reading about silence. He was becoming it. The next morning, when he opened the library, he did so with a new kind of steadiness. Not as a man performing duty, but as a monk walking barefoot through his own cloister, welcoming others into a sanctuary they didn't even know they were entering.